So today's topic is negotiating. Um, we've looked at some stuffs that maybe I don't know what we'd talk about for like the attorneys and stuff. That would be rather than skills, assets, or what would you call that, Lavelle? Having um, some being able to go to experts, advice, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's always good. Um, and then obviously besides your whatever your main job is, if you're doing development or if you're doing sales or whatever design, whatever you're doing, you're going to build up those skills. And the idea within our cooperative is building up skills in areas that um, are related to the overall business and working within the group. Um, and it helps strengthen um, the group as a whole, um, gives you opportunities to that you may not have if you're only focused on the skill set that you may have come in for a specific area. So this one is something that could be applied within the group and outside of the group as well. Negotiating, and specifically um, what we'd like to go for is win-win negotiating. All of the different techniques could be used as a non-win-win, as in you're just someone else is trying to get everything for them, or you're trying to go that way. But um, the idea that we have is to try to figure out if there's some middle ground where all parties are going to find something and walk away satisfied. That may not be what they came in for, all of the specific items, but if you can figure that out, um, then everybody should be a lot better off. So we're basing this particular talk mainly off of Secrets of Power Negotiating, the book by Roger Dawson. There's some other good ones as well. Getting past no, um, getting to yes, those books. I don't remember the author off the top of my head. Lavelle, if you know.
Roger Dawson? Oh, you're talking about the other
On the
guy.
other one,
No, I
yeah.
don't remember.
So this one is, um, some of the other books that you may read are good as far as like informational. I'd say this book specifically, though, has a lot of elements that you probably would see immediately in your everyday life, whether that's at work or other places, even interpersonal relationships. So there's a lot of things that could be applicable immediately. So that's depending on your style, that could be more beneficial for people. I think it's pretty good, especially once it's broken down. There's a lot of content in it. The audiobook's really good. So let's see. Have we shared the mind map on the main page?
Not on the main page. I shared it in Wolf Den, and I also have it shared on my screen.
Okay. Um, let me see. I have it up on mine, but I was going to see if I can. Does everyone that's on right now have access to that via Wolfenden, or Lucina? Do you have access to um, the main meeting page, and we can post it on there? Just as a, oh, I know what we need to. If you'll, Lavelle, if you'll put it up on Imager, and then do you want to do that? And then I could post it into the meetup
Yep.
after?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. just drop a link in the Wolf and Den whenever after you've uploaded. So um, we have the main areas we're going to go over. We may not be able to get to everything today, but we'll try to go through most of it. So tactics of negotiating is the core area if you're wanting to go just apply this. You have some other elements which help you to understand what you're understand the situation better, including things that you can do beforehand or in the middle of negotiation. Stuff like people types, how he breaks it down, and that's kind of just about understanding how people work through things, their personality, what they would prefer as far as interaction with the people, or if they care more about the facts and details of something, or if they're going to make gut reactions and decisions. And then you have the getting information, so how you're going to gather information to both make decisions on what's valuable to the parties that are negotiating, as well as trying to gather information so that if you come to, say, an impasse, then you can bring up those sort of things. Power, so these are stuff where one or the other party, or potentially both, will have power over each other in certain situations or reasons why they would have that. And then the way people communicate, there's stuff, hidden messages and meanings behind during the conversation. I think I want to go, let's go ahead and go into some of those before we go into the tactics, I think, because the tactics are pretty extensive. There's a whole lot of those. What do you think's a good area to start? The people types or go into like the stages, the 3 stages as a starting?
The stages and the
And then
stages.
the information. Okay, so
Stages
sounds
and
good.
rules.
Okay, sounds good. So the 3 stages on the negotiation, we have establishing criteria for both sides, and that would be, and then get information about the other side. So this is whenever you're finding out as much details about what they're actually wanting. This is both from the business standpoint as well as the individuals, whoever you're dealing with. What are they wanting out of this? Any information about how something's going to be used, this is a product, um, anybody involved, and then trying to reach a compromise based on all of that information. The 3 rules: never assume you know what the other party wants. So some of these suggestions are a little bit counter to what you may see if you know anything about sales or marketing. And I've specifically on this one, he's saying get to know the person rather than the business. It is good, of course, to know the business, know the agenda, know what are their business goals and everything else. But when you're coming in to actually do a negotiation with individuals, depending on their type and everything else, if you don't know that, the deal could be, killed, even if you're going along giving facts and numbers that match everything that you understand about the business. So that's something that he pushes a lot, is you got to step away from just some specific sales rules or anything else and understand who you're dealing with. So never assume that you know exactly what they want. Try to get to know them. Try to communicate with them. Second rule is broaden the scope of negotiations. If you get down to one issue, you could end up getting blocked. It creates a environment where one or both parties can feel like they can't budge. So you always want to try to bring in um, more issues. And there's something we'll get to on some of the other areas over here, but an example would just be if you come to some major issue that's causing a lot of conflict where nobody's wanting to move forward, if you can bring in some smaller issues that you can work through, then it can help move things along. The other rule is never assume that money is the bottom line. So it may seem like the bottom line, and it's always important to keep in mind, but there can be all sorts of other agenda that may be a much bigger issue, and that'll tie in with getting to know the person rather than just the business. So does anyone have any questions on these stages or the rules or comments? Well, do you have any thoughts?
You guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead,
hear you.
Josh.
Um, I think I just wanted to expand on the rule to never assume you know what the other party wants. That was a real that was pretty significant for me because it's like what does that even mean? Never assume what I mean. You are negotiating, so most obviously you want the same thing, right? At least at first take, it seems that way. But then it's when you really think about it, it's you may be negotiating for one thing, but I think the underlying meaning is why do you want that thing? And so it's I mean, an example I like is a TV. Like I may want it for a computer monitor, but you may want this TV for entertainment in your living room. And so yeah, you're negotiating. You're both negotiating for the same thing, but you want two different things. And so I mean, I feel like once you identify that want, then you may be able to still I may be able to get my computer monitor, and I may say, though, I have a projector for you, maybe you want that, and then we both get what we want. He gets like a cool projector in your living room for entertainment, and I still get this boss TV, and so I mean computer monitor. And so I think that's like thinking about it for me. Thinking about it like that really helped as far as like, not assuming what the other party wants because it's kind of hard to see sometimes unless you actually dig in. So I like that rule. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. I agree with what you're saying as far as knowing why they want something. So that can definitely happen where everybody seems to be in agreement, but when it comes down to the details and reasons why, then it could be drastically different, and that can make a big difference on the communication. Does anyone have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, he was pretty adamant about once you get down to one option, then you can run into a deadlock. That's what it's called. When there's one option and you both, say for instance, price, and you just keep it there, that's when the deadlock happens and you reach an impasse. When you have more than one option, then it's hard to get deadlocked. So
Cool. Okay, so I think we can go over the power maybe next, and then maybe the hidden meaning in conversation. So the power again is you can have multiple types of power. We have those listed, and you can be in a negotiation where both parties have different types of power. Um, so that can go through the something from position. This is legitimate power, so you have a title or position in a company. When you have the capability to reward people or punish people, then you're going to have power. Those would be reward and punishments. Um, and those can be different extents. You can see stuff like in the open source community. We talked about that a little bit last time. Capability for someone that's within a group in a big software, they could allow your changes. They when they allow them to come in, they're kind of granting you with some of their power in the community to say you did well, and that's something that's they have. I guess there'd be something similar on if you get a rejection on that. I guess that's there too. We didn't really talk about that with Val, but um, the some of the most obvious stuff would be like a policeman, right? So um, just getting pulled over for a ticket. Uh, Charisma and reverent power, those are tied in with individuals where one is based on just your personality. The other's something that I could say someone may have built in consistent values, reverent power. I don't know if there's another word for that. That's the one he used. But um, whenever someone's consistent in all of their values, or I'd tie that in with like if someone has like integrity and right and a bunch of other things, then that brings power from their word whenever they're communicating something. Um, we've seen people that have charismatic power. Expertise, so you can see that all over. You don't have to actually have more expertise than a group. It's at least within what we're talking about with negotiations, it's how you project that. Um, and that can be on communicating more precisely within the knowing the specific things that you should communicate during negotiations, and can make it you're perceived to have expertise, and then that would give you that. Obviously, you can also have expertise within an area. I think we have another thing about bringing experts, being able to rely on people, bringing them in. So that can be helpful within negotiations if you're actually coming in and having someone that's an expert in a certain area, and you're negotiating about various things to be able to rely back on that. Um, Helps. Situational power, that can be something like when you go to the post office and you're really wanting something to happen a certain way, and the person there doesn't have a lot of authority in life overall, potentially. They may not be making a lot of money, but right there in the post office, they have all the control over how things are going to happen. So that's situational power. And you can get that in a lot of different areas. Information power, so that's can be everything from the sharing to withholding information, and that can be tied in with both positives and trying to provide and help, as well as withholding to give you an edge. The main thing is being aware of all these different things that can happen. So if you're going in and you're unaware that you're being affected by various things, then you can be swayed, even though you may have an advantage in the product you're offering or the service. You know, if you're going in and saying that you can do some development on something and they don't have anyone else, but you're not aware of some of these various things that can happen, then you may be dropping your price or negotiating down when you should be able to stick to your guns, which is what a lot of these are. So that the other side, I guess, is hidden messages, but I'll hold on that. Does anyone have any questions on power and how that can affect, or any comments or anything? No? Okay. So besides being aware of power type things, which are more environmental, or how the atmosphere is, the actual conversation's important. So watching for hidden meanings in the conversation. People can say things when they mean the opposite. He refers to that as expressions meaning the opposite. Throwaways, which seem to be minor statements that end up being right before a very large, momentous announcement. So someone they say, by the way, and throw something out. It can be something small, or they say, oh, before we close, there is one more thing, and then they throw in the big deal. We need a 20% reduction to be able to close this. I don't know, whatever it is. Legitimizers, those are expressions used to legitimize a statement not completely true. So they may have various facts that go around a statement, and it tries to strengthen that, but the actual statement is not completely true. Maybe they don't have a certification or a requirement for it, but they're asking for it, and maybe they want a concession on the cost if you don't have a certification, but maybe they don't need it yet. It's just a future thing. Be all sorts of items like that you got to watch for, which is why you need to gather information. Justifiers, expressions that lay the foundation for failure. That one seems pretty obvious. Erasers, words that erase everything that became before the conversation. So they could do a lot of build-up about how they want stuff to move forward and talk about all the different items, and then they say, but we need to go to our board, and it looks like from what I've communicated before with them, this sort of thing normally doesn't go through. So it takes away all the positives and everything else that was said. This could be on either side. Deceptions, statements immediately preceding an eraser, that means the opposite of what was stated. So This is all those words before that's trying to get you to feel good before they remove them all. The prepares, clauses that get you ready for the speaker's request. This could be all sorts of statements where they're trying to get you feeling either safer or more comfortable with the idea or more friendly. This can be played with good guy, bad guy type things. Just anything where they're trying to get you ready for their big request or whatever the size of the request. Trial balloons and sense orientation are kind of similar type things. The trial balloon is whenever they're wanting your opinion on something that's already been decided. So they're going to make statements and try to get some of your input, but they've already made up their mind, so it's more of how do they get your way, and so it's filling that out. The sense orientation, this is the phrasing and expressions that are directed towards the speaker's dominant sense of things in the negotiation. So these are similar to as far as the power with regard to being aware of what's happening in the negotiation. You're wanting to try to be aware of how things are communicated, both the wording and itself, as well as how they set things up. So if there's a lot of communication before some of the big facts are laid out, you need to be aware of that so that you can be prepared. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah. I guess I wanted to say that for me, these things they come into, I guess they come into play, or I understand them better when I understand what this guy's view of, or how you should negotiate, his overall view. So you're going over the power and the hidden meanings, but these things kind of, what they do is they allow you to use those gambits that are at the top. And the gambits, to me, you can probably skip everything else in this book and just look at the gambits, and you'd get something out the book. Just from looking at it as a game of chess almost. So yeah, the hidden meanings are useful because people talk, or the way that you communicate um, can give you a different standing with whoever you're talking with. But I mean, knowing these is kind of, it may help you to a certain extent, but you're probably not going to change the way that you talk too much. They give you information about the other side, but I just like the hidden meanings in conversation is just one of the more the parts of the book that I, when I read it, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, I just totally just remembered maybe one, like the preparer, and that was it. But the gambits, they stay with you. There's definitely something to memorize. And no, it's 7:40, so whenever we get through whatever we're getting through, I want to talk a little bit about Enki and trying to study this stuff, or figure out how to apply this stuff, because you can learn it, but then never do it. So
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay. I agree. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
I like the the hidden meanings are something, and it's I mean, just similar to what Watson just said about knowing them, but actually, um, I mean, it's the same thing as like lying. There's things about when people lie. I know one of them is like looking off or blinking too much, or those telltale signs. I don't remember all of them. I just like that's all I have right now. Just like you may not remember all of these hidden meanings. But just with like negotiating, I wonder if and a lot of them are involuntary. I feel like it's just just made through culture. But I think it's kind of I mean, for me, a personal goal would try to focus on those responses. If I do actually see one, how will I react to one, and what's the best response in that situation? That's what I think is interesting, and like the real fun part for me, if I can get through that. And so, I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I agree, Josh. I think that a lot of the power, the hidden meanings, and even the people type um, are more of having a feel for what's going on. You don't have to memorize these things. It's more of if you can recognize that the flow of the conversation may be shifting, um, and that may trigger you to at least become more aware of the previous statements or what's coming up, then that's a big deal. Or you could get tripped up if you feel like it's, if you take everything at face value, then it's going to be a problem. Obviously, if you're negotiating, you're going to be watching for stuff, but if you're only watching for lies, then you may miss stuff where someone's doing something like the legitimizer or the preparer, and they're not really intending, but this is if how they communicate in general. But if you know that that there are these different ways of communicating, where someone's potentially in power, so they have all their trappings and everything, and then whenever they're communicating with you, they can be leaving stuff out because of the situation, and at least you'll have an idea that you may need to gather more information or try to adjust the conversation, maybe bring in more focus on not letting it go to deadlock because you're bringing in enough issues. Um, and I agree with you, Avell, that the other ones are the ones, the tactics are the ones that you need to memorize. Um, I feel like if you only do the tactics and you're not aware, though, of how things are feeling with regard to where the conversation is, then you may get someone that's trying to use tactics. Maybe they're pushing like good guy, bad guy, because that's what they always do, and push, 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 and not realize that maybe the conversation shifted at one point and you could step in. So one of the things that he talks about is trying to be aware of when you need to step in and use different tactics, and I think that's what the other ones really help with, so that that maybe because of the power plus using some of the hidden conversations that you need to use specific tactics. But if you use the tactics themselves, you're probably going to most bang for your buck, learn those, and then start getting better by picking up the others, but at least knowing the others when you come in. Let me run through the people type real quick, and then we'll jump over the tactics.
So Taylor, just a sec. I was just
Yeah,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
I just put a link in the chat to one of the posts from the Gervais Principle series, and whether or not you buy into that whole thing, I think that's debatable. But even if you don't, it's got some really interesting stuff about different types of talk, where basically he talks about, there are essentially different classes of people, and they have different languages that they use between themselves and the other groups. And I think some of that might be useful to even just, to kind of be aware of, to see if somebody does think that, if they're basically in a position of power over you and they're going to say things to you that they know you will think is, beneficial to you, but really it's just, for their own benefit, that sort of thing. Anyway, it's all interesting.
Yeah, this looks good. Would you mind posting it on the Google Plus event page as well?
Sure.
Thanks.
I just put it out there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we talked about this maybe a while back at one of the earlier meetings, but I got to read through that again. Ian, thanks. Does anyone have any more comments before I go on? Okay. So people types, I'm going to not go through all of this. I'll just run through it real fast, and then we go on to the tactics, because there's quite a few of those. So the people types, he breaks them into 4 different types. Pragmatic, extrovert, amiable, and analytical. I think the quadrant that he uses is pretty good. He has it goes from left to right. It's from up to highly assertive to not very assertive, and then highly emotional to not emotional. And the way that works is pragmatic and analytical are going to be on the less emotional side with decision making. Amiable and extrovert are going to be more towards higher emotions. And then pragmatic and extrovert are going to be assertive. They're going to be more decisive. Analytical and amiable are going to be less decisive, slower to make decisions. The amiable person is going to look at trying to make everyone happy in the negotiation, trying to get all parties pleased with the outcome. So a lot less focused on the actual facts or the business outcome or anything else. They're wanting everyone to walk away feeling good about it. They're also going to take a lot of time to make sure that all parties are feeling good. The extrovert is going to usually come in and be able to look at things, communicate, and make quick decisions based on how they feel about the topics and the group that they're with. They may look at a proposal and for really quick and go through it, talk to a person, and be done with their decision in 5 minutes. And depending on the other party, that may feel like they didn't give it any time. The pragmatic, they're going to be faster than the amiable or analytical, but they're not going to focus on the emotional side. They're going to want all the facts. What are the benefits? What are the concessions? And then they're going to make their decision. The analytical is going to want to collect as much information as possible. They're going to try to look at all of the different components. They're going to be less emotional, or potentially the higher up they are within that, the potentially not emotional at all about it, looking at all the facts and numbers. But they're going to want a lot of those. So they're going to be the type of person that's going to come back and say, well, we need more information on this topic and this one, and gather that. So the quadrants also show you how, if you're negotiating with someone, so if, say, the analytical is negotiating with the extrovert's going to make very quick decisions. It's going to be based on how they feel. That's going to frustrate someone that's analytical and wanting to gather details and feeling like they didn't have enough time. The analytical person's going to frustrate the extrovert who's already made the decision, and the analytical still trying to gather information before they even potentially try to think about something. Likewise, the pragmatic is going to have the hardest time with the amiable. They're going to not care very much about any of the emotional feeling side. They're not going to worry about how the different people feel in the group. They want to look at all, it may be all parties. They're going to, if they're doing win-win, they're probably going to look at how everyone's going to come out and then say it's done and want to move on. So if you know who you're talking to whenever you're going into a negotiation, then you can help the conversation by knowing how to communicate with them. So whether you're on the extrovert side, pragmatic, or wherever, if you're speaking with someone that's analytical, then trying to have as much information beforehand when you're coming in, and then understanding that you're going to need to concede on the time, provide some information is going to help with that. Also, if it'll help move things along if that's what you're wanting for the decisive side. Similarly, if you're on amiable or anything else, you're going to need to do similar for the other types. These are the sort of things where if the business stuff and the facts and everything else match up, but you don't understand the person, then all the other tactics and everything could fail. So at least being aware that you're communicating with somebody that cares about these things can be a major key with how you're going to use the tactics. I personally feel like the types are a little bit limited and maybe biased towards the author's type. I think they're still pretty useful as is. I'd probably, if you actually cared and dug into this, I would probably lean to saying people are maybe on a scale for sure, and then probably primary something and secondary another. I know working with people that I could see them as like maybe analytical extroverts. They are maybe pragmatic extrovert would be more likely, or pragmatic analytical. So they can break through, but I know that if possible, they're going to try to analyze a lot more details, or maybe they're more on the analytical, except for on some very specific stuff, they're going to be something else. But that's my main thoughts, is it doesn't break down enough, and the wording on these might be a little off. But the main gist is just know that people are going to be of different personality types and want different things. Does anyone have any questions or comments about people types with regard to negotiating?
I think that the reason why there's 4 in there is because when there's sales people, well, first off, this guy negotiates for a living, consults people who are diplomats, and is paid to negotiate. And I would take his way of looking at categorizing people, because he gets paid to do that, over someone else who doesn't actually apply and have to categorize people and get paid on that. That's one thing. Number 2, I think he's normally, when he's talking with people, usually probably sales guys, but also, like he talks about, talking with lawyers who negotiate and get paid for a living, and he's consulting them. Oftentimes they will put people all in one category. So he's used to people saying, or approaching everyone the same way. Salesmen going for the hard sell every single time and stuff like that. And the hard sell just kills the amiable type person. So just getting somebody to except 4 is a feat. Trying to put more than 4 and all that, you basically might as well just not even tell them to categorize people at all. In my opinion, they're just not going to listen to you. That's why I think he does that. But that's all I wanted to say.
And for what it's worth, my mother-in-law is a real estate broker, and she was telling me about a system that she found, and it's not exactly the same, but it's essentially analogs of all 4 of those categories. So they basically say, if you're trying to sell a house to this kind of person, do this. And it's basically a form of negotiation. So I don't know if they were derived from this or related at all, but kind of interesting. It was basically 4 very similar categories.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I didn't look up all of his background, but Roger Dawson does a lot of real estate, or at least did whenever he was doing the book, and I think that's where at least part of his negotiation came prior to the negotiating, or if that's just a side thing. I don't know, if Wavell, if you have more background on that, but that makes sense to me, and that you'd see that they're having to deal with a lot of different types of people. I agree with you, Wavell, that people aren't going to memorize a bunch of types, and they're probably going to get confused. I think if the more you know as far as the scales and where people can be and everything else, the better off you're going to be. But I don't, just the idea that there are different types, whether you know there was 4 or you just at least admit that not all types are your type, is a win.
I think an analytical type would say there's lots and lots of people and they need more. We need more data and we need to categorize them in the billion different categories. That's what I think an analytical. Pragmatic would say, I only want what I need in order to get done with the negotiation. So even in what we're talking about right now, you can kind of see the differences in what people would, uh, how people would apply, even just looking at this itself.
Yeah, I agree. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Tactics of negotiating. So, I don't know if everyone has the mind map up. There's quite a few here, which is why Wavell was talking about using Anki. It's a memorization tool. If you can start getting some of these in mind, then it will make a major difference in how you communicate. I like that he points out several times throughout the book that all of this can help you throughout your life, including interpersonal communication. I was pointing out earlier that this isn't just about communicating with customers, but within the cooperative or any type of team or group, it could help the group. If you're negotiating on, or you would be negotiating if you're working with the team, deciding on how a project is going to go, development. You may have a hierarchy sometimes where someone is just deciding here's how it goes. But if you're on a lot of teams within a company, you're going to have decisions on different parts that you're going to have to talk about. Within the cooperative ourselves, we have different decisions where we're having to vote and think about stuff, and working together to come up with compromises, knowing how to negotiate and the different things that are going to come up is important. So here's a lot of tactics that you may run into just that are automatic, people know about, or you automatically do them, like as kids. um, waiting on time into the end. I don't know if that's in here, but that was a big one. Waiting to the last moment is a tactic. The good guy, bad guy would be one that most everyone would know. I had that happen today actually while talking with a customer. The primary person that I talked to brought on another party right as the talk started. Um, the first one that I talk with all the time played good guy, the other guy played bad guy. Um, and everyone's pretty familiar with that. It's been in cop shows forever. Another one that's probably familiar, at least in how it's used, is higher authority. So when someone refers to some other person or entity that they need to go get approval for, um, they refer to a lot about salespeople. You're going to buy a car or something, and they talk about going and communicating with the manager. Let me see if I can get that approved. This allows you to take the pressure off of you for making the decision, which they could be giving from different ways. They can't force you. You don't want someone there. So the idea is you can always go back, and then you can use other gambits, the tactics here for negotiating. Let's see. A mediator. So the idea here is the mediator is someone who's perceived as neutral. So they may not be neutral, but they need to be perceived as neutral. And that's the opposite of that would be someone that is neutral but not perceived as neutral would be actually a negative for the negotiation. And I've actually seen that on a couple of negotiations where someone didn't realize that a party had a communication with someone else. They were no longer looked as neutral, and that was pushed out. Let's see. Trying to pick out some that may be common, and then maybe point out the others. You have two here. Well, trade-off principle. This is probably something everybody's heard, but it's something to keep in mind. Anytime you're asked for a concession in a negotiation, automatically ask for something in return. There's one that's called Call Girl. Those look the same. If they're not, well, you can tell me why. Anytime you make a concession, ask for a trade-off immediately. So you may be happy to make a concession in a negotiation. It's not a big deal what they've asked for, but it's about setting precedent and making sure the value of what you offer is there. They could always come back and ask for, there's many reasons. So they can keep asking for more and more concessions. If they know that you're going to ask for something in return every time they do a concession, then it's going to stop that, or at least slow it down. And it also allows you to come back later if there's something that you need and communicate with them about the concession and the fact that there was value built into that. Well, is there something that I'm missing, that the trade-off principle versus it says
One of them you initiate, one of them the other side initiates.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Another one that he points out a whole lot, which probably some people are familiar with, but he brought it up over and over, is flinching. So a noticeable, he says visibly, reaction. I'm saying noticeable because you can do this even if it's non-visible. If you're on a phone call, Google Hangout, you want a reaction that's very noticeable to the other party. So the idea here is you can get concessions via reaction from the other party immediately. So you may be okay with the price or the offering that's been made, but if you make a large visible flinch, then they can drop the price immediately, even though it might have been below what you want. He points out several examples, even if you may be embarrassed or something else. So this could be, I don't know, if you may be going in for a job interview, or you're talking to somebody about the price of something, or about to get the price, and they put out a number and it's higher than what you expected. But if you react, flinch, whoa, way more than I expected, or oh, I was expecting a lot higher than that. Um, a lot of times they're going to immediately come back with something up above because they feel like they're going to miss out. Anyways, let's run through the others, I guess, pretty quick here. Let's see. Power of the printed word. That's a really good one. People believe stuff in writing. He points out getting out of the hotel, that you need to be out of there by 1, and that it was something like, I don't know, 10 or 20. It was really bad, people getting out, and now it's like 90% of people leave on time. So that's something you can do with anything. Putting it down in a contract, sending it over, is good. Withdraw the offer principle. So the idea is you have something out on the table, and then after some time, it may be during the negotiation, if it fits in a way to do that, or it may be that you've gone away for a day or some period to talk with a higher authority and say, we're having to withdraw this, or the price or the service we're going to offer is not there. And the idea is to have a rollback to some other offer that you made that they might have been okay with, but they were pushing. You had some concessions, and then you drop back. And this gets them to stop on concessions, similar to the trade-off principle. Decoy technique. So this is just about trying to bring their attention to other items rather than the main issues. Puppy dog close. So trying to give access to the product or service so that they start getting attached to it. It's becoming valuable to them. They don't want to give it up then. This would be like your 30-day money-back guarantee sort of things. Giving it, maybe beta access, or not beta access, giving a free trial of the enterprise and all the items on your product. Reluctant buyer, so feigning disinterest, even if your enthusiasm is high. I don't know if you have a reluctant seller, but that's the other side. So if you're very happy with their offer on the price, if you got them to, say, give a budget, if it's higher than what you're wanting, you still want to feign, I won't say disinterest, but you want to feign that you're happy with the offer that they made. Otherwise, you're giving them control. The one-it-all philosophy. So this is about coming in and asking for a lot more than what you expect to get. You always want to be able to negotiate down to what you would want versus negotiating below what you wanted. So coming in to do that, that's kind of like flinching on the opposite direction. Splitting the difference. So this is encouraging the other person to split difference with what you want versus what they're willing to give. So if someone is like I was saying, if you're going and looking at a job and they say 100,000 and you were looking at 120, then you try to say, well, how about 110? You want to always keep splitting and getting, rather than going down towards them and working them back up with anything else. Um, Smart, dumb. So this kind of goes along with the other side of the expert. If you're playing dumb, like you don't understand all the items, then they're going to step up to try to help you to understand. So if you communicate an interest in understanding what they're doing, or their service that they're needing, the business, or different things, they'll start communicating more and more to let you know, uh, help you to understand it. Um, that can be all different types of things. And then you can tie that in with the expertise, at least what I was thinking, to in other areas. So you let them help you, then show expertise on an area where you are going to be able to do well. Feel, felt, found. Okay, this one's kind of interesting. So he talks a whole lot about agreeing up front. Always agree. This ties in with, you'll hear people the sales thing where you're always supposed to say yes, the customer's right, that sort of thing. Um, it doesn't mean that you're going to not disagree with, or try to go a different direction with the negotiation, but you want to start out with agreement with whatever they're putting out there, and then you would communicate about how other people have felt the same way, and then show them how your company or you yourself have found that they would benefit from your service by doing something else. So this may be that they're trying to point out that another service has all these other offerings or something else, and you're going to agree with it, and then communicate, turn it around and communicate why you found what you're offering to be better. Um, let's see, we got, I think, three more. Set aside gambit. So this is why you wanted more issues, rather than if you get to an impasse, you get blocked. So you want to be able to have other issues so that you can work through them, get some momentum to finish the big one. Nibbling. So nibbling is where you or they are going to try to get little concessions or get more items that they're wanting in the negotiation, small bits at a time. There's counters to all these, by the way. Right now we're just going through the different items. Hot potato, someone wants to pass their problems to you. So they're talking about reasons why they can't do a certain thing in the negotiation, based on their own internal issues. Passing those, trying to make it your issue to solve. And that's it. I think we ran through it. So
Let me add this. All these can be done by you or by the other side. So, for instance, hot potato, you can just start out explaining why your task is difficult and you're already into negotiating using the hot potato, and asking for more money because what you're doing is negotiating. Or, I'm sorry, what you're doing is difficult. But so these can be both sides. A lot these aren't marked as some of them being unethical. So some of these are unethical, he says, but you need to know about them because other people will do them to you. So just use your own discernment. And that's all I really. Oh, I wanted to add that I shared the Anki on the Wolfen Den Slack channel. If you haven't used Anki, just go to ankiweb.com and download it for either Mac or Windows or what have you. It's very useful on Android, or I think it's actually free on the iPhone. But
it's actually the opposite. On Android it's free, and on iPhone it's expensive.
Oh,
I think
okay,
that's where
okay,
they get all their profit, is the
okay.
iPhone.
I've got both of them, but no, it's worth it. I use it for lots and lots of things, but this is one of those things where you just aren't going to. It's not that useful unless you memorize the stuff. So I would suggest that you download the Anki and just go over these gambits at least. This would be something. Anki is useful if you don't know what it is. It's spaced repetition software. It tries to move things from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. It's useful for things that you want to remember for the rest of your life. This is one of those things that you should try to learn and keep forever. It's not something you should forget. So that's all.
Awesome. Um, does anyone have any comments or questions before we close out here?
This is on topic,
Nah.
right? But I was actually curious, Wavell, what do you use to make the mind maps?
Um, this tool is Simple Mind. It's useful for on Mac. It works. I don't know if it is on Linux. Taylor, you could tell us, but it is on Android. So I sync my local mind maps to my Android. And if I'm running or something, I have my phone. I can pop something in there. Uh, but it is not good for sharing the mind map and collaborating. For that, I would recommend Mindomo.
What was that?
Mindomo
Oh, okay.
for
I've got a coworker
collaborating.
who, yeah,
Yeah,
coworker was looking for a good mind map tool.
yeah. Unfortunately, it's well. I've probably used just about every one of them out there, and this one and Mindomo, I can't. It narrows down to those. Mindomo's good for sharing with everyone, collaborating and all that stuff when you want to do that.
Cool, thanks.
Yes, Simple Mind is not available on Linux. You can run it directly. You can run it under Wine, the Windows version. It's maybe now that they have the Android, they'll eventually release. The Android is really nice though. So if you're wanting one to use on the phone, it's actually pretty easy to use on the phone. Sometimes these sort of things with diagramming aren't very easy on a small device, but it's actually pretty nice. And I believe it can be, um, it's been a while since I've done it, but I believe they can be exported into a format that's importable in Xmines or one of the, I don't remember what the other one was. There's one that's like Java, I think, that's pretty good. I don't remember what it was called though, Lavelle, but
FreeMind.
yeah, actually FreeMind. I think the exports from Simple Mind, like there's some vector format or whatever that's compatible. Um, but if you're going to do a lot of that, um, you're probably better off not using Simple Mind. And Android to that would be fine, but like if you're on a Mac and Android and a bunch of them, it's probably better just use Mindomo.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Um,
guys.
Josh, were you gonna say something? It seemed
No,
like you.
man. I was just I like this topic. I mean, it's one of those things. I'm gonna just have to try to remember these points because I mean, it's just like, I mean, this conversation here is exactly like the line conversation I've had before. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, and it's just, it's some of those things where I can sort of remember them, and I'll look at someone, and then I'll say, like, are you lying right now? But for one, it's like I don't remember exactly, so it's just a thought. And then for two, I mean, even if they are, how do I proceed from there? It's I mean, one of those things in the tactics, as far as good cop, bad cop. I read somewhere, I'm not sure if it was this book, but it's like if you see that, maybe you should call it out. Hey guys, cut the crap. I see what's going on, but that's something in and of itself. But I don't know. I like this topic, and so it's just something I feel like I'm gonna try to look at least, especially the tactics of negotiating. So if anything, so I can stay on the offensive. But
Yeah,
no, it's all.
the book itself, like you said, is really good. The audiobook is a really good listen if you're driving or whatever. If you're real interested, memorizing with Anki is definitely recommended, or get a paper copy so you can highlight some of the items. One of the things that he does go over, Josh, is counters. So versus what you're saying, if you catch someone lying, what do you do? I mean, usually if you're saying they're lying, then that's going to end a conversation. With the negotiating on all of these tactics, the idea is knowing the next steps. So some of them could be counters like good guy, bad guy, may be saying, hey, are you going to play that? Are you going to play good guy, bad guy? What are we really doing here? Or some other counter to it. Some of these other things like flinching is, if someone flinches, then you need to know they flinched, or you may react. You need to be ready for that. When someone flinched, if your immediate reaction is a concession, then very likely they were negotiating, or at least that's a possibility. But then knowing if someone's doing those and the counter doesn't end it, it just means what is the next step in the negotiation process. So if you're interested, I definitely recommend doing the memorization and then looking at the counters. That might be a good idea too, Lavelle, if we do counters in the Anki. I think that'd probably be pretty good. Okay. Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.
If you have
Oh,
any thoughts on a next topic, then just post them in Wolf and Den or post them to the meeting thing for next month.
cool.
And it'd be fun if it's just a topic to go over or a book. We can always look at a book to go over. We can continue with a previous one or this one if there's something else. I'll list those books on the meetup, the ones that we've gone over. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Sounds good. Talk to you guys later.